Okay, I'm here with Crumbzz. I'm going to do one of my reflections interviews. And so the place I'm going to start with you is obviously your time in Curse. Now, the strange thing about the Curse team back then, because people have to forget the Curse team now, was that, okay, if we're talking about all the teams in North America, then they were like a top team. But actually, if we're talking about like the best teams, you were kind of like one of the worst of the best teams, if that makes sense. Like you were going to finish like 5th or 4th or something at an event when you were in them. But the team had famous players, but a lot of them were like people who were season 1 players, but they were like the people who got knocked out of those teams when they then got better players, you know. Does this sound like a fair characterization? What do you think of the level of that team at the time?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I left the team at the time, because I felt like we weren't really getting anywhere, even though it had a lot of popularity. As the league has progressed, it's been proven time and time again that popularity does not win you games.
So when you left Curse, it was the famous 3-way trade, okay?
Yeah.
And this, in theory, the storyline goes that people think at least that it was all started because Dignitas was going to lose Voyboy to CLG. CLG wanted Voyboy, and then that set off the chain of events because then they were going to get rid of St. Vicious, and that meant he was going somewhere. Then he goes to Curse, so Curse fills the jungle position. Then you actually go top lane in Voyboy's position at Dig. Did that news just come out of the blue for you?
Well, in that 3-way trade, I wasn't really familiar as to the position between Voy and Dignitas and CLG. All I know is that at that time, I wanted out of Curse. They offered me the thing at the Curse house, and back then, I really wasn't ready to make the commitment with the team to move into a gaming house, move down to LA for a team that I didn't have much faith in. So I know that I wanted out, and just out of nowhere, you know, I had spoken to some people and they had said, oh, you know, maybe we have something for you. And then eventually Dignitas approached me and said, just out of the blue, hey, you know, want to join? You got a spot, but it's top lane. So I said yes. And up to this day, they actually haven't told me what happened with Voy. So.
Because the thing was, that was the interesting thing. Everyone else in that trade went to like the same position but a new team. But you were going to top lane, okay. What was your expectation going into that? Like, did you already have something in mind? Like, oh, I already think I know how I'd play top lane. Or since you were a jungler, and you know at the time, jungle was like all about ganking the top lane. Right. Did you already think you knew how to play top lane? Like, it's going to work out?
Yeah, you know, back then, ganking top is basically the only way you could win a game. So you spend a lot of time there and you understand matchups. And before playing for Curse, I used to play both top and mid lane for other lower amateur teams and leagues, so I was already familiar with the lane, and playing top lane wasn't something that I considered too big of a challenge back then. You know, eventually even played against some Korean teams when we moved to Korea for a month to play against them, and I felt like I did fairly well versus some teams, but eventually from top lane, what drove me away from it was just that you did not have much of a say in the game, especially back then. And even now, you look at top lane, it's just basically the game is 4 people and they got top lane. And it always pained me to see something happen elsewhere on the map and I couldn't be a part of it. I couldn't say what to do, what was wrong, what was right, because I wasn't part of it. So that's something I didn't like about it. But I just stuck with it because I felt like going top, no matter what position I would go into, leaving Curse was the right decision for me.
Because the curious thing again is switching back to jungle almost wasn't your decision again. It's because I Will Dominate got banned. Yeah, exactly. So if that doesn't happen, you think you would have just stayed at Dignitas, stayed in top lane?
Well, I'd say it was my decision when Dominate got banned. We had the option. Okay, you know, we got like 2 months to find a new player, and we need either a top laner or a jungler. And at that time, finding a jungler was really difficult. It's like, okay, how are we gonna get a jungler? We don't know a single person that can jungle. And then we knew some more that could play top lane, so went with top lane. And I saw it as an opportunity for me to participate more in the game, playing jungle. And I'd seen how Dominate jungled all the time, and we always interacted with each other, teaching top lane, because he liked to play top lane as well, and I liked to play jungle. So we'd always teach each other a little bit here and there. So playing jungle back once more was pretty natural to me, and just took a little time to get adjusted to it. But it's something that I definitely wanted to do, not something that I got put into.
Since you've played both positions, I wanted to get like your take on a few players who play those positions, because you have like a unique take on it, especially in the era when the top and jungle was the synergy, you know. So an obvious one is I Will Dominate, because you actually played with him as your jungler. So how would you describe him as a jungler for people who haven't seen him so much?
I think Dominate's a great jungler right now, and I'm certain he's going to make it into the LCS again, which is really exciting for me to have my friend back in the LCS. He's been banned for a year, and now he's back into the LCS now. He's a solid jungler that plays really aggressive, and he really gets, how do you say, not just underrated. He gets people don't give him any credit that play against him, and he always goes back on them and just smashes them and punishes people for not giving him any credit. And I really like that about him as a player. So I think he's definitely one of the best junglers in NA.
So another one is Saint Vicious, because the thing was, he's the guy who replaced you in Curse. But when he replaced you, people still thought like maybe he's the best NA jungler. He was very highly rated. But in his time in Curse, it seemed like his motivation he went downhill as well.
Yeah.
What did you think of him during his career?
When he joined, he was already seemed to be, from CLG's point of view, a player that was just going on a downhill spree. He didn't really have any ups going for him, and he was, again, popularity, and it was something that's really big for Curse at the time. They wanted to be a more publicity-oriented team, wanted to have just, the biggest star players, and getting St. Vicious is huge in terms of publicity. It's one of the biggest, probably the biggest player they could have probably gotten and will ever get. So at that time, I think it was a great move for them, but he's definitely a player that was declining, and at the time, he was certainly good, but nothing stellar. He wasn't a fantastic player. I didn't get the chance to play against him when he was at his peak in CLG, so I don't have much of a say of him back then, but the current St. Vicious that I played against was nobody that I would fear when I jungled against him.
Okay. A really confusing one for me as like someone interviewing people and getting lots of opinions is the odd one, because either people say like, oh, he's old, like he can't play anymore, or next month they're saying, oh no, he's still really good, like he's good. Like, how do you evaluate? Does he have some kind of strength that only works sometimes? Like, what do you think about with the odd one?
I think odd one gets a lot of criticism or analysis of how he is from solo queue, because he's such a popular streamer and streams so often that people create these opinions about him just from how he plays in solo queue, which is very different from how he plays with his team. He's a really strong team player, and I think he's a great jungler right now. His strength is his synergy with his team. The chemistry that they have with the jungle is excellent, and I think that makes him one of the best junglers right now, actually. And if you take him out of his team, I doubt it, because he doesn't have the most incredible mechanical skill. He's not going to pull an insect kick out of nowhere, and he's not going to play Lee Sin either. But you put him on champions that he knows he's comfortable with, that his team is comfortable with, and he's going to make strategic plays that will win him the game.
Because that's the main thing.
That's how the game has evolved now.
Like whenever someone would talk about jungle position, actually people who were junglers who weren't that mechanically good would say, oh, maybe I don't need to, because maybe it's decision making. In the modern day with all these Koreans, and some of them have really good, like Dandy has insane mechanics, do you need to have good mechanics as a jungler? Can you get away with just being that old school guy who just has the decision making still?
You can definitely get away with just making decisions, because with decision making you can avoid conflicts, but the thing is it also limits your play, right? If you meet a jungler that has both the decision making and the mechanics, that's the guy who just it's the everything package. That's the jungler that you want, because he can mechanically outplay somebody as well as be at the right place at the right time almost all the time. The difficulty in mastering mechanical ability and jungling at the same time is that it takes a lot of time and commitment. For instance, you'd say somebody like Faker has mastered mechanical ability. That guy doesn't have the time to make the strategic decisions that his jungler makes. He can't be looking around the map the entire time. He's going to be completely turned on to his game and how to outplay and how to micro his champion perfectly, while his jungler doesn't really have the time to do that. He only has split seconds to practice mechanical ability when he goes for a gank, because he's half the time fighting creeps.
So where do you fit on that scale between like just pure decision making and awesome mechanics? Where are you there?
I'm certainly not the best mechanical player. I do play a lot of Lee Sin, so that I have mechanics in that regard. And I know my mechanics are not naturally good at all. Naturally, I do not have any of that. All the champions that I've played, I've always practiced against bots. Like I go against bots and just practice skill shots all day, over and over. I got my girlfriend to help me practice skill shots on Elise. We'd go 1v1 middle and just throw cocoons at each other all day just to see if I could get better. So on and on and on, just to be able to reach a mechanical skill. But reflex-wise, definitely not top, and that's something that like an AD carry or a mid laner really needs, and that's why I see myself faltering, because skill shots, I trust myself pretty well. I could land almost all my skill shots, and that's something that's really, really important, but reflexes is something that I lack. For instance, I went to a website that apparently like Double Lift and Wild Turtle were putting in their reflexes, and they're putting like 0.100, and I tried doing the first time like 0.700, like 0.500, like 0.300, and then I just kept trying over and over, and maybe after like 30 tries I reached 0.100, but it's definitely nowhere near the level that a mechanically incredible player is.
So in that case, like, we don't want to generalize too much here, but when people used to look at Insec, obviously the amazing thing about him is he had like as good mechanics almost as you can have in LoL, but he was just a jungler as well. Exactly. Was his decision making good as well as a jungler, do you think?
Insect lacked more decision making than his mechanics. His mechanics, the thing is, with his mechanics at that level, he was able to just make plays that you didn't even need to think about. You didn't need no strategic decision to make an instant ward hop kick on Lee Sin. That's not something that you can strategize and think, oh, if I don't have the mechanics for this, instead of just doing it instantly without the other guy being able to react, I have to loop around, find the creative path to sneak in behind them without them seeing me and pull this off. But since he had mechanics, he could overcome some of these mistakes. Some of these, not mistakes, but just thought processes. And you could see towards his end of his jungle career, more specifically, what I remember is the game that they lost against MVP Ozone in when they're on KTB. Mm-hmm. When he basically, one of those games, and like almost all of them actually, he got caught out a lot by his team. He made some really poor engages that cost his team the game. And he tried to get out of it with mechanical ability, but it just wasn't enough because his decision was so poor in that regard that it just overcame his mechanical ability and it cost him the game. So you definitely need a balance for that. But he was definitely one of the best junglers. But you put somebody like, what's SKT junglers now? Bengi, who you never see him make something incredible mechanic. He doesn't pull an insec. I mean, I'm sure he can, but that's not how he plays. For some reason, you watch this guy jungle, he's sitting on the lease that has, like what, 20 CS at 30 minutes, some ridiculous number. The guy's got loaded in items. He's everywhere possible. He pulls off incredible gank that you think, oh, how did the other guy not know? And every game you think, oh, it was the other guy's mistake. It was the other guy's mistake. But after a while, after you keep saying that, it's like, maybe that doesn't seem to be the trend. Maybe it's just him being able to be at the right place at the right time. His sense is so good that, hell, if he missed cocoons, he could still be the best jungler in the world because he's going to be there and be in a position that he can kill without even landing a skill shot.
Because the really strange thing about Insec is, like, I don't think in history I can think of an example where someone was either the best or like second best at one position and they were like, oh, I'm going to change position now. And so it makes sense on a level because Kakao is very good also. So if they wanted to have both of them in the same team, someone has to change. But if we ignore the Kakao thing, is Insec good enough at top lane now that it was still a good move? Like, wouldn't he just be like still amazing at jungle? What do you think?
I think he definitely would still be an amazing jungler, especially now with the carry junglers like Elise with such mechanics, or I don't know, Olaf. You kind of need mechanics on Olaf anyways, or Lee Sin still. But I think the decision while he moved top was mostly that not only did he want to play tanky initiators, which was the meta back then, but that he and the Association of KT Rolster wanted to basically monopolize the best junglers in Korea at the time. So they wanted to keep both. So that would make them one of the strongest teams, because no other team would have such an incredible jungler. And if you restrict two of those junglers to one team, the other teams are struggling. Back then, the meta, well, basically the meta always is just the jungler kind of wins you the game. So if you keep two of them together, put them in the same team, not only will they have great synergy together, which they do, you'll make other teams struggle.
Okay, so you were talking there about Insec's decision to go top made sense in terms of you wanted to play these tanky champions, okay. I actually have a question, again, like I said, because you played top lane as well. So I wonder, am I just making this theory up? When Hotshot GG retired, it made sense when he retired at the time, like, okay, he had problems playing some of the champions that people were playing then. Also, in terms of the team, it just looked like he was never going to go uphill from there. But actually, almost exactly the moment that he quit was like, it's almost like the next day everyone was like, oh, by the way, everyone, we're only playing tanks at top now. It's like, what the, I should have, could he have really just stayed for this next season and would he have been good?
I think so, I'm not entirely sure or actually remember his decision for retiring, but he would definitely fit in incredibly in this meta because that's all he played, just these tanky top laners that don't move from top lane at all. But now, though, these tanky top laners, they don't really offer split push potential like the ones that he used to play. Like Shen, great split pusher. Nidalee, like tank Nidalee, great split pushing. But now these like Mundo, Shyvana, they always team fight. Their strength comes in being able to team fight and deny the opposing enemy carries damage, so they can just team fight and soak damage forever. So he would definitely have to change his playstyle because he wasn't known as the best team fighter. He was always an incredible top lane, like split push. You can't move him. If you go there, he's going to kill you and whoever came there as well. So I think he could definitely still be playing, but he wouldn't be an amazing player. He definitely have to practice at it again. And he actually plays mid lane now in solo queue, and he's really good at mid lane. Like, his LeBlanc is the best LeBlanc in the world just because he's put so many games of that. And I'm sure with that much dedication to a champion, I'm sure he has time to put it to maybe 3 champions. You put that dedication to 3 champions top lane, and you get that level that you reach with LeBlanc, you're going to be the best top laner in the world.
So another NA top lane is Voyboy, because again, this is another one where, like, all these pros I talk to, some of them are so divided on him, because some of them, when he was really good in Dignitas, they're like, oh, he's an awesome top lane and he could still be awesome now. But other people think, okay, he was awesome for a while in Dignitas, CLG not so good, then in Curse, everyone always jokes that the whole reason why Curse were on top all those weeks in LCS was like the meta, and then once it swapped, they just went like straight down. So how do you evaluate Voyboy when he was a top laner?
When he was in Dignitas, from what I know, when they won second place at Hanover, he mostly played Lee Sin back then, Lee Sin top, which was incredibly overpowered. It's basically 3 times as strong as he is now. So that's one of the reasons why he's accredited to being so good, because you can just play overpowered champions. And after that, they really lost to Gambit, and I don't remember anything more about his career as top lane. All I know is that it kind of spiraled down in the online tournaments, and then eventually he went to CLG. And when he went to CLG, what they say is that he just wasn't being able to put on the champions that he was comfortable with. He wasn't playing the playstyle that he had. He was putting the playstyle that CLG wanted. So taking it out of his comfort zone. And in CLG, he wasn't very good, and eventually he got kicked out. And then when he went to Curse, he still was kind of iffy. He'd play these oddball champions, what he thinks is good, and sometimes it would work. Sometimes it really would not work. So he's a very risky player in terms of his picks, and not his decision making, but his picks seem to be not much reason behind it. And now he's mid laner, and I haven't got the chance to play much against him, maybe 2 games against him in mid laner, and he certainly needs a lot of more work in mid lane to be at the same mechanical level that he was playing top lane. But he could pull it off. The thing that makes me certain that people can pull it off is basically Hot Shot's dedication to a champion, LeBlanc. If one guy can take one champion so seriously, if he could take that dedication to an entire role, he could be the best one, at least even mechanically. You don't need, it's the same thing we discussed about Instack. If you have such mechanical skill, you're going to be able to overcome half your decision making and just be that good.
People sometimes comment that whenever I did all these interviews now, I would always do sort of like an all-star question. Then if I ever asked about the jungle position, everyone was just like, oh, I want Diamond Prox. Like, Diamond Prox is the one. Yeah. And so it makes it sound like everyone agrees, oh, Diamond Prox is just the best jungler ever. Is he like still that level now? Is Diamond Prox still the best jungler? Was he the best jungler? What do you think?
There was a time when he was... I have not had much experience against him, and sometimes I like to make decisions that I actually have experience against. And at the time that Diamond Prox was the best jungler was when they won, considered by far the best jungler. There's no one that comes near him. Was in Hanover 2012. That was the time when when he was playing his Lee Sin, his Shyvana. That one was Diamond Prox bowed to him, and I actually got the chance to play against him with the old Curse lineup. Really old Curse lineup, and I jungled against him, and I felt like I played sort of his game and then countered it, because we were actually winning that game against M5. Eventually we threw some poor mechanical plays from other roles, but I was able to basically predict where he was going to be, counter gank him, gank his lane, and see what I was going to be able to do. And I was really happy with myself with that game. I thought, wow, I really gave Diamond Prox a showing. So I wasn't particularly impressed, because when I see a jungler or a player that I think this guy is the best in the world, you have to think, okay, this means that no matter what, he's going to be able to basically stomp everyone all times. And the only player that can actually do that is not a jungler, and it's just like Faker mid lane right now. There's only one player in the world that you can say he's gonna beat everyone all the time. And you've seen Diamond Prox like a Worlds maybe struggle a bit, but then an IEM like smashed completely. So it's a sort of a polar player at times. He's very consistent often, but he also has his downsides, and he's very innovative and all that, and he works incredible with his team, sort of like Ottawa. I don't know how he would play outside of a situation like Ottawa, just because I haven't played against him. But I wouldn't say that he's the best jungler in the world. I wouldn't say there is nobody that's the best jungler in the world right now, because jungler is such a position that is so heavily influenced by your team that it's too susceptible to say one person is the best jungler. The styles can be so different and so effective. For instance, Meteos, you can say he's the best jungler in the world because every game he'll have more items than anyone, right? He's gonna have more levels, more gold, more farm, because his play style fits with his team to farm. But you put somebody like Bengi, sometimes he's gonna have as many items as a farm Meteos, but he's not gonna have the score to prove it sometimes. He's gonna have objectives. He's gonna have dragons that don't show in his score. Creeps that doesn't show in his score. And it's just a position that's you can't narrow it down to one person, say that's the best. It's just that guy knows how to work with his team.
So you must have known I was going to reference this, the famous Crumbzz comment, okay?
Of course.
EU is behind the meta, but then the problem is that's where the quote ends for everyone who just thought, and they're like, oh, is that all he said? And then they go crazy. But I actually saw the interview where you explain the answer and you say, no, the reason I thought they were behind the meta is because it looked like, they only cared about the mid lane. And it wasn't until the Season 3 World Championship that everyone realised, oh, wait a minute, actually Season 3 has been all about the mid lane and jungles. And that's like the whole thing. Every good team was like that, In light of that fact, if we evaluate Dignitas, you and Skara, jungle mid synergy, how would you evaluate how it was?
That's not a lane that we have too much synergy in. To be honest, the champions we play don't really have that much synergy to begin with. You see a lot of people play assassins with Vile, assassins with Nocturne, these dive champions. Sometimes we just have two champions that fit two completely different roles, because when you think about jungle mid lane synergy, you always think about just laning phase. How do they play the laning phase? How do they protect objectives here? How do they, gank? How do they defend ganks, counter gank? There's not much about team fighting. So a lot of times we find ourselves playing team fighting oriented champions. And for instance, right now, some champions mid lane are just almost impossible to kill, like Zed, perhaps, if you're playing against a Ziggs or you're playing against LeBlanc. That's not something you can really gank too easily. So you don't find yourself going mid lane too often now. It's my fault for not playing much, not duo queuing too much, because I do think we should and don't have the best synergy. But it also comes to the play styles and what we want to play at times and what we think is good in the meta. And some teams have great synergy mid lane. They focus heavily on the lane and just assassins mid lane with divers, and it works great. But I tend to focus more on other lanes and just leave Scar to do his own thing. So the synergy is not too great, but I just like to make objective plays around the map, not just focus on one lane. So that's just a difference in play styles, I guess.
Because in general, if we look at how the two splits ended for Dignitas, you guys are stuck in limbo.
Yeah.
And I gave this analogy on Reddit when someone was talking about Dignitas, where, because I follow basketball, the NBA, and there was a team in the Eastern Conference called the Atlanta Hawks, and from 2009 to 2011, they would always finish fourth in the conference. They would always get to the second round of the playoffs. They would always do well against whoever they played there, maybe losing 6 or 7 games. But the whole point is they were never going to win the NBA. But the problem is it's almost because they were too good to not win, they were never going to do bad enough that they drastically changed the team. They just kept the same team all the time, and they were just kind of praying that somehow the team just magically gets better. I mean, if you look at Dignitas, obviously at the time, each step you would have had a reason okay, we're going to keep the team because of this, or the team's doing well enough, I think we can still win. Yeah. If you look back now over 2013, aren't the results an accurate representation of how good Dignitas was?
I'd certainly say that's similar to how I think it is, because the thing is we have made some changes, and you can expect different results when you make changes. But over that entire first split, no changes were made, absolutely none. So expecting to play differently in the first game from the last one, absolutely ridiculous. I'm actually really glad that we didn't get relegated, because when we played Curse that first game and we got crushed, I thought, wow, okay, here it is, end of League of Legends career, back to studying. And then I had put in a lot of practice, and I really changed my mindset for the last 2 games. Okay, this is it. I was the most nervous I'd ever been for a match, because everything on the line was on those games. And now there's actually been one of the roster changes that we made on Patoy was one of the things that we wanted to make a while ago, just because it felt like it was something that was just keeping the actual synergy from a team from being able to, for us to, I guess, blossom, if you want to say that we just weren't mending together. We weren't like mixing together. We'd have nothing social between us. Nobody would, hey friend, how are you doing? Ask how your day is, good morning. Nothing would happen. Just everybody to their own quarters. And it just wasn't the team environment that we really wanted. And after almost being relegated, really had to make a change. And then eventually brought in Kiwi Kid, who still has a lot of work to prove himself, because he's still not an actual member. He's being tried out as a substitute for the team. He's not like the team support player. He's still on tryout. So we still have a lot more changes to make if tryouts don't go well enough or all that. But I think as a team, we also were able to get an analyst, something that we rejected a while ago, and we're able to bring it in. And the more help you can get into the team, the more that we can expect changes to happen, because we do need changes to happen, because it's not enjoyable being able to always be not good enough to win, but just not bad enough to get kicked.
Because the problem with that scenario is when you look at the team, people are going to say, okay, if they're stuck in this position, then why don't they make a change? And so one reason I'm thinking of is a lot of the teams who make fast changes, it's because, you know, like their personalities, they're very demanding and they expect like we have to win now or we have to change. And so sometimes maybe they even go too fast with the changes. But when everyone looks at the Dignitas players, they think like everyone seems pretty laid back. Everyone seems like they enjoy each other. Also, it seems bizarrely as if this could be a negative. Like people take too much responsibility when they make a mistake. So if one person fucks up in the game, the other people will be like, yeah, but I made a mistake too and stuff. So you're not necessarily blaming the person you need to kick out. Have any of these been issues holding the team back? I mean, what's stopping the team just figuring out the course to go on?
I wouldn't say that taking blame for others is the reason. I don't think anybody does that. I think we're really vocal actually in telling when somebody messes up. It's pretty quick in the scrim say, okay, you're shit, what are you doing? Or somebody messed up, okay, you lost us this game. And the thing is, I think that as a team, we have a lot of faith in each other to improve. And that's something that may be holding the team back, that we just really believe that each other can improve. And it's been time over time again, and maybe some people haven't made improvement, but there's just, I guess, a bond that just, you know, you have faith in the other player that, okay, I know you can improve. I've seen you do better than this. I know you're better than this. Like, I know you can do this, but perhaps the way we express it, if calling other shit isn't really going to help out. So I think the way that we address mistakes that others make probably has to be changed in order to be able to become a better team without actually having to make a change. And that's something that I think we're going to be able to work out, even after this tournament, the Battle of the Atlantic, in which it was a show match, but it still was a showing of the first new roster for the new year that we have. So if that happens, like, that's basically would be the last straw. If we change the way that we address players' mistakes and our own, change it, just keep changing. It doesn't matter how drastic it is. You keep changing how you approach somebody's area. Instead of saying, hey, you know, you're bad at this, how about just stand behind them until they make the mistake and just, no, stop, do something else, just do that. Or just have somebody else do a cue more, just switch roles, show them another position. And if after that, after all else fails, then we'd have to make a roster swap eventually. And I mean, it is to win, it's not to make friends, so it'll have to happen if mistakes don't get fixed.
Because what was interesting was when you described how in a lot of these cases, like maybe you were picking comps that were going for team fighting, so late game style, that's how you were going to win the game, okay. I've heard it said from, I think when I did an interview with Skara, that like you guys were really bad early in games and you were just like, if we can just stay alive, then we have a chance to win late game.
Exactly.
Well, I'll give you an analogy, okay. I've heard that in sports, when someone has like a weaker leg or something like that, it actually tends to be the other leg that gets injured because they like overcompensate because they're so worried about the weak leg that they use the other one too much and then they blow that out, okay. So to give this analogy, I heard also when Froggen left EG now and he left all those old players who got criticised a bit, he said that one of the problems their team had was that since they knew some of their players weren't mechanically as good, they just had the one style, like, okay, we have to go for the team fight style. That's the only way we can win the game. And if you look at their team also wasn't bad. They were always coming fourth, they were coming third. It sounds like a similar scenario. Is this true?
Completely agree. I could not agree more with that statement. I think that definitely we try to overcompensate in our mistakes too much, and that puts a lot of pressure on the players that we think are making the mistakes. And then that eventually just changes the complete play style of somebody playing instead of their own game. you know how everyone says, oh, we got to play our game to win. We eventually don't even play our game. We play the game to fix our mistakes. It's not even to play the game to win. It's just the game to not fuck up. And that's not going to win us the game. And that's definitely something that held back EG, and I think that's something that's holding back Dignitas as well. And personally, I'm trying to change that as well, though. It's really hard to resist the urge because you know that a mistake that somebody makes is going to lose you the game. It's going to cost you a win. So you have to basically force yourself to say, no, I need to just do my own thing, let them correct their mistake, and leave their mistake to their own. I'm going to do what I can do to win. And that's something that takes actually a lot of brain power and willpower to hold back onto and say, no, I'm not going to play something that can help you get through your difficult times. I'm going to play something that's going to help me get even better. I think once we get over that hurdle and address the mistake, how we address each mistake, that's the last thing we need to do. And if that doesn't work, then again, players need to be kicked.
Like I mentioned, I referenced before, when you made the comment about the EU being behind, because you didn't think that the meta of like focusing on the mid laner was so good.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask about that was, it sounded like what you were saying was along the lines of like, it's not necessarily that you were wrong and it turns out EU was like ahead or whatever. It's more like EU was always going to focus on the mid laner anyway, like they always did in history. And it just so happened that at this point in time, the World Championships, that's when the whole of League of Legends sort of fit to that meta. And we even saw the Koreans and the Chinese, when they had the super awesome mid laner, were doing well. Is this accurate?
Exactly, yeah. And when I said that, when I explained why I said it, was simply because I was focusing more on how to improve my personal game, which was I was only looking at the jungler. And I made the mistake of just doing the same thing when you say compare Media's Bengi. Media's score is going to be incredible. Bengi's is not, but Bengi's putting perhaps a bigger impact on the game. So if you just look at it on paper, you'd say Media's better jungler, better playstyle, everything is better. And that's a mistake I made, and I was too arrogant to notice that mid lane was the way to win the game. Because perhaps as a team we were struggling to identify that ourselves, so I didn't see that mid lane is how you win the game. And once that happened, once the world showed that the best team was the guy that had the godlike mid lane player with the incredible jungle synergy, even though they had a solid team, one of the reasons why they won is just because the mid laner was so powerful, was such a solid player. He was able to be part of the meta and be the best one there. And that hasn't changed at all. It's still mid laner, but now jungle does have a much bigger presence in the game. But mid lane is now, well, it's always been very influential, but with the champion pools now and such high damage that they can bring into the game and snowball potential, I don't see it changing anytime soon.
Okay, I have another question about Dignitas that will sound strange as well. Because first of all, I'm going to compliment your team and say that at most positions, well, if we exclude Kiwi Kid, because he did so badly at top, everyone else, if I looked at the team, it wasn't that they were bad. They were all like good but not the best at their position in the NA. Okay, so everyone was good but not the best, and so as a result on the overall team it looks like, okay, this team should work, but then actually no one thought of it from this perspective, like who is the star player of Dignitas? Like every team I can think of who's really good have at least one big star player. Who's the star player of Dignitas?
Star player, I mean, that's the guy that's always going to do well, right? The thing is, when we lose, it's a stomp. When we lose, we just get destroyed. And when we win, sometimes it's rarely that it's a stomp. You know, when we stomp would be against the lower LCS teams. When we'd win, it would be like neck and neck the entire time maybe the other guy throws. That's a second split at least. At least first split we're doing really well. But as for a star player, I think one of the reasons why you don't see a star player is, again, statistics. And just so many losses don't really get a star player. But even if we were winning, there still wasn't a star player on that team. And the reason why I think that is because the team, when we were all losing, everyone looks bad. There's not a single player. Like, there's just something about the play style, how we play, that I haven't figured it out, and I want to figure it out. And I don't really know, but when we lose, we all look horrible. Everyone's feeding. Nobody's making a right thing. And if they do, it gets quickly canceled by a negative. And when we win, everyone's doing something great. Even if somebody makes a mistake, it's quickly fixed by something great. So it makes it seem like when we win, it's just a miracle. This team does not make almost any mistakes at all. And when we lose, it's just this team has absolutely no potential. This team's got nothing, and that's just part of the way we play. And that's not true, but that's just how it seems, just because of how poorly we're doing right now. And once we get back on track, I think we're still not going to be able to get a star player, just because that's just how the play style is. And once I figure it out, I can tell you, okay, this is why we don't have a person that can play. And I think part of the reason, though, is because my play style focuses, I'm more of a as team player, and I focus on helping what I think can win us a game at very different times, is almost all the different lanes. So if I'm spread out across each lane, not one lane is going to look incredible. Each lane is going to look relatively even. When we get to team fights, it's still going to look even because everyone's at the same level. And if I change my place and say I'm just going to sit bottom lane, Cutie Pie Kiwiku would look incredible. If I say I'm going to pick a champion to cap middle lane, Scar would look incredible. If I pick a champion to go top, Cruiser. So one of the reasons why I attribute that is just to my own play. And once I change that, if I want to change it, and I'm practicing being able to play different jungle styles, once I do that, you can definitely see a star player, but I wouldn't say that it's a star player on his own. I think you could say it's a star player attributed to my jungle play.
Since, like you referenced earlier, the difficult thing about judging the jungler is, like, depending on how good his teams are, especially his solo lanes, he might look really bad when he could be really good, and vice versa. He might just be okay, but he'll look awesome.
Exactly.
Could you pick out an example for me of someone where either they didn't have a good team in the past and you always thought they were good, or maybe they just got a good team now and we should expect something? Is there like an up-and-coming guy where you think, like, this guy could really be a top jungler one day?
Okay, let's see. A really incredible jungler. I guess you could say maybe it's sort of difficult, but not the exact same thing, but Oddone. Oddone, if his team was doing poorly, he looked terrible. When TSM was sort of on the losing spree, Oddone wasn't really, you could see, Oddone sucks, Oddone's not doing anything, he's not ganking any lanes, he's not taking any objectives, he's not doing a thing. But when his team was winning, Oddone carries every game. Oddone is the reason TSM is winning. You see this all the time and time again. And that's just how the jungle play is susceptible to the lanes. And it's not frustrating, but simply something that I just look away from when I see comments on teams or individual players being made. Teams, it's more acceptable. When you make comments on individual players, when you see a play happen, you don't know who made that call. You don't know who decided that was going to happen. Sure, half the time it could be the actual player you see, but you don't know the reasons behind why that player made a decision, why he picked that champion, what they really wanted to achieve with that. And I think that's why Oddone is really good right now, but that's also the reason why the jungle and a player is so just as good as their team is.
So as like a final question, I want to give you like a hypothetical type one. So my one for you is, because I know you watch OGN, I wanted you to give us for people who don't watch much LCSNA, okay, but they know who Dignitas are, give them a reference point by giving me a Korean player for each player in Dignitas, who would be like, this is the Korean version of Skara, this is the Korean version. So, closest match.
Ooh, all right, let's see. Bottom lane, I'd say Cutie Pie would be equal to Prey.
Okay, why?
Well, Prey sometimes is incredible, and then sometimes it just doesn't do much. No offense, yeah, I'm sure you won't take much offense. I'm just a little bit quoting on some recent games that we have now. I'd say Kiwi is up and coming, so I don't know any new support players that are happening in OGN, so I can't really give you one for Kiwi. And then Cruiser, he just plays a tanky top lane, so I'd say he's more like a perhaps Long Panda is a top laner, yeah. I'd say Cruiser would be like Long Panda. You know, he just plays these tanky champions top lane. He's still new to the scene in competitive. And mid laner, Skara, maybe like Ambition. Skara would be like Ambition. And for myself, I wish I could say Bangu. I can't do that. He's too good. Let's see. I'd say somebody that's. I have not followed the new teams. You know, I always keep an eye out for the games with teams that are just doing exceptionally well. Not exceptionally well, the teams we all know, like KT Bullets, CJ Blaze, SKT. I always watch those teams. So I'd like to compare myself with somebody that is up and coming and really has a drive to improve to be the best player. But since I don't know any player like that, or at least I haven't actually done enough research on OGN to know one, I'd probably say for myself somebody like Helios from Blaze. Just because he's been around for so long, he's not the best mechanically player. He sometimes makes poor decisions like myself, but he seems to always be able to at least provide something for his team.
Okay. Do you have anyone you want to thank or say hello to at the end?
No, I just want to thank my fans and just thanks for supporting me. It's it's kind of, I don't understand, and I'm just really grateful that people can actually still makes me wonder all the time. It's pretty crazy that people can actually follow a team that is struggling so much and just help them out. So hopefully the investment pays off soon. That's definitely something I'm looking to do.
Okay.